Hi, y'all. It's Angela, and I'm back for another episode of Business Unveiled. And today is going to be really exciting because we're going to be talking about like real estate, not the kind of real estate that you think of, like when you're buying a house. This is totally different, totally different. So, we're going to be talking to someone who owns 3,500 plus. So that's like in the thousands rental units. And he's the leader of the Hoy Deal Pipeline Club. So he'll tell you more about that. And it's acquired over $255 million of real estate by syndicating over $25 million of private equity since 2016. So that's really, really quickly. And if you don't know what any of those words mean, it's okay. Like, still listen up because you're going to learn a lot about this. And so I'm going to bring on Lane Kawaoka. Okay, you got to tell him how to say your last name because I'm too country to say it. So you're from Hawaii, right?
Yeah. Well, thanks for
Okay,
having me. And yeah, don't worry about it. Don't worry. Nobody gets it anyway. Yeah.
Kawaoka. Is that how you say it?
Yeah. Yeah.
You're
Close
you're
enough.
like being nice. And so it's like all these cool Hawaiian names. Like I can't do that with my tongue. It's so I have some friends that live in Hawaii and like their accents have changed as they've moved from like Nashville, Tennessee over to Hawaii. And I'm like, how do you make your tongue do that? But anyway, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here today.
Hey, thanks for having me. Thanks for having me,
I'm
Angela.
super, super excited to learn about your story and your journey. And I know that our listeners are very interested to know. And I know that you have a background in engineering and really you've understood, like at a very young age, like how to engineer the wealth, like just building strategies around um, the rich and the top 50 investing like podcasts. So, before we even dive into all this, like how you got into real estate and how you have developed this pipeline club, take us back. Like, did you grow up in Hawaii? Like, were you surrounded by entrepreneurship growing up? Like, how have you even gotten to where you are today at such a young age?
Welcome to Business Unveiled, the podcast designed to help you thrive in the creative community. Here's your host, events and productivity consultant, Angela Profit.
What's up, GSD leaders? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Business Unveiled, where we share expert tips and secrets from top creative industry professionals. You know, we're going to take you behind the scenes of our experiences, share with you what we've learned from them, and how it's made us stronger. Because no one said it's easy owning a business, right? But it's a lot more fun when you've got a strong support team around you. And that's exactly what we do at GSD Creative. We're right there by your side. And I'm so excited that you've chosen this podcast to take the first step in growing a productive, profitable, and successful, wildly successful business within the hospitality and creative industry. Today's episode is being brought to you by GSD Academy, where I personally walk you through my 4-step process with personalized videos. I give you downloadable templates and so many resources. So if you're serious about changing your life and your business and you're ready to GSD, that is get shit done, go to bit.ly/GSD Academy.
Yeah, I mean, my childhood growing up was pretty normal. Middle class. The way my parents told me to go to school, get a good job, and apparently I was good at math and science. So I got pushed into some kind of engineering track or something when I was younger. So that's what I did to go to college.
And so did you go to college in Hawaii?
So I went to University of Washington up in
Oh,
Seattle.
okay. And then did you miss the water?
Not really. I mean, growing up, you're asking if I surf. I mean, I
I
know
know.
how, but I was kind of indoor, play video games kind of kid back
Gotcha.
then. I mean, call it the linear path, right? Like just, you study hard, you go to school. I mean, that's just kind of ingrained in kind of your head that this is how you should do it, right? You work hard and you get a job and you work at that job for 40, 50 years. You have a car, you got a spouse, you got a house to live in, and then you invest in the stock market, all these retirement funds is kind
Mm-hmm.
of like the wealth building dogma that they tell you. But yeah, I mean, it's all wrong, it's completely wrong.
Yes, I agree 100%. So when did you realize like this shit, they're lying to me. Like this shit is not right. Like when did you figure that out? And how did you figure that out?
Well, it took me a while. So like I graduated college and I had a pretty good paying job, 80 grand back in 2007. Luckily I was able to save money pretty well, so all that stuff about the don't drink a latte every day. Yeah, I did all that. I, pretty much ate ramen for a few years. And I was able to save maybe like 50 plus grand out of my paycheck every year to
Wow.
save up to buy a house. Again, I was like brainwashed. Like, they say you should buy a house to live in, which I definitely don't agree with, especially if you live in high price areas like Hawaii, Seattle, California, New York, Boston. But we can get more into that later. But so that's what I did. I bought a house to live in, and because my job took me all over the place, and working for the railroad, I was never home. And I was like, this is silly to have this nice place to live in, only home on Saturdays. So I started to rent it out. The rents were $2,200 a month, and the mortgage was $1,600 a month. And to a young 20-something-year-old kid, that was a lot of beer money back then.
Yeah.
And I really didn't like my job. So I was like a civil engineer and industrial engineer.
Uh-huh.
And the first job that they put you out is like a construction supervisor, and it's really not fun, really, really not fun. So I was like, man, I got to just keep doing this. It took me 2, 3 years to save up my money, and if I can just keep doing this, I'm going to be out of the rat race. I'm going to create these streams of income and use those streams of income to buy more properties quicker.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of the start of things. And yeah, the first rental property, I bought it all wrong. Like it was in Seattle, for example. You don't buy properties in primary markets, and then all the numbers were, it didn't even meet that 1% rent to value ratio threshold that we look for.
So your first rental property was in Seattle, and then what did you learn from that? And like, how did you start to invest in two, three, four, five, and like, how the hell did you get up to 3,500 plus?
Yeah, so the kind of two main things, I started to realize investors, they invest for cash flow. Most unsophisticated investors, they invest, for appreciation. And it's kind of logical, right? But then, it's also way more logical where you invest where the actual investment pays for itself. So how do you ensure that you look for this indicator called the rent to value ratio? So if folks are at home right now, you can hop on something like Zillow, and granted, Zillow is not the best data out there, but it's good enough.
Yeah.
So you hop in there, you look at a property, and you take the market value, and you try and look how much it's going to rent for. I think Zillow's got that rental estimate on there right now these days. So, or you can go on Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, or rentameter.com is another resource. So you take that monthly rent divided by the purchase price, and we're looking for a ratio of 1% or higher. So a lot of people in California or Seattle, it's a huge culture shock. But I mean, Angela, you can buy really nice houses out where you're at for 100 grand that rents for $1,000. But in Seattle, you'd be lucky to rent something for $2,000 that was under 500 grand.
Mm-hmm.
So, the numbers just don't make sense. So you're looking for a 1% rent to value ratio or higher for an investor grade property. So that's kind of the first go around.
So like we were talking before I started recording, and you're like, oh, I was just in Huntsville, and yeah, we have some properties there. Like, where are all these properties, and how did you figure out how to diversify, not just in, where you went to school and where you're from, but because in my head, I'm like, gosh, that can get really messy with taxes. But how did you figure that out? Or did you hire somebody to do it for you? Or how do you surround yourself with the right people? Or did you just learn how to diversify and get these properties all over the world?
Yeah, so logistically, even from the start, I had professional property management to do all my dirty work for me. Like, so they interface with the tenant, they do all the leases, they kind of manage them on the day to day, and the property management kind of shoots me an email or phone call when something happens, like something breaks or they not need to renew a lease or something's happening. So it's pretty manageable and it can be pretty passive, when you have under 20 or 30 units. But yeah, my first few rental properties units were in Seattle. And that was where I realized investors don't really invest in what we call primary markets. So primary markets are places cool to live where the numbers don't make sense, like Seattle, pretty much all of California, Hawaii, New York, Boston, all the sexy cities, right?
Mm-hmm.
So your question is, well, where do we invest? Well, we look for these secondary markets or tertiary markets. So secondary markets are like Memphis, Indianapolis, Atlanta, Birmingham, Indianapolis, Little Rock, places like that, big
Mm-hmm.
cities, but they're definitely the second tier. And that worked for about a decade from 2010 to 2020. But, nowadays you're going to have to kind of go out to more tertiary markets. So, that's why we're looking up in Huntsville these days and, like a Lake Charles, Louisiana, smaller markets because, prices has kind of gone up over the years.
Yeah, I feel like in Nashville, I mean, there's so much freaking construction. It's great for business. And, I grew up in Mount Juliet, which is about 30 minutes from the city. And you used to could get a pretty, get way more for your money. You could spend $500,000 and get a 5,500 square foot house, but then you come down towards the city and now you're paying $1 million for maybe 2,500 square feet. And that's for a house. And then if you look at some of the condos, for 2,500 square feet, you're looking at $3 and $4, $5 million in some of these condo buildings. And so I'm like, this is not New York, people, and this is not LA. This is not Santa Monica or Hollywood. But the more industry that comes here and the more our city grows, they're like 100 people a day move to Nashville, like the higher shit gets. And so as the market rises, what do you have to change your strategy or pivot to where, like, so you're not losing money, or do you already factor in and foresee that growth like in big larger cities?
Well, I mean, that's why your prices are going up because folks like myself are creeping over from the West Coast and the
Thanks.
East Coast, right? I mean, some of those prices that you're kind of quoting, I'm like, wow, that's awesome, right? Like, because
Yeah.
here in Hawaii, I mean, it's $1 million for sort of a decent starter home. And that's
Mm-hmm.
absurd to you guys, where that house probably would be 250, 300 in your backyard.
Mm-hmm.
It's ridiculous. And people can pay it. The salaries are a lot higher on the West Coast, and mostly because like just the cost of living is higher out there too.
Right.
But yeah, I mean it's always getting harder and harder, but the fundamentals are 1% rent to value ratio or higher. At that point you're probably going to be positive cash flow. And I mean, if you can cash flow, you hold on to the asset and you hold on to a large portion of debt, and that debt is very valuable because people don't realize you're hedging inflation. I mean, with all this stimulus money going in, they're just going to inflate it away. And if you're there holding hard assets like real estate that happen to cash flow along the way, you're going to be the beneficiary of inflation. But everybody else, you're going to be kind of losing your wealth over time.
Mhm. So if somebody is listening today and they're like, I kind of want to get involved in real estate and I want to start to build assets. I think you teach this. Do you teach people how to get into real estate and how to invest and build wealth?
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of the anti-real estate guru. You know, there's a lot of programs out there that want to take your 20, 30, 40, 50 grand. And, you know, I mostly they work with people who don't have money, right? Like a lot of my clients are, you know, they're working professionals, they have money, or successful entrepreneurs. You know, they've got money to invest. Their
Mm-hmm.
highest and best use is what they do today. But to invest passively, right? That's kind of my shtick.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, my suggestion would be, yeah, just check out my first dozen podcasts. It's all about buying single family homes. I've kind of moved off personally to investing in private placements and syndications as my
Mm-hmm.
net worth has grown. But yeah, I mean, that's the fundamental, is just a single family home rental. And you kind of understand it from there. And you start to understand how easy it is. I mean, you mentioned like all the taxes, like, you know, I don't know. I just give it to my CPA and they do it.
Yep. Yep. Outsource,
Right.
and surround yourself with people who know how to do those things.
Yeah.
So you started with to ask you about your podcast, how did you decide to start your podcast? Was it because people, I can only imagine like people coming to you and asking you a gazillion questions? Is that one of the reasons you're like, I should start a podcast?
Exactly. I mean, like all my buddies were asking me, how was I buying all these properties out in Birmingham or Atlanta? And then, you know, I wasn't really visiting them. You know, honestly, you don't really need to do that if you have a good team. And especially when you're buying sort of houses that are commodities, you know, 3 bedroom, 2 bath, 1,200 square feet. Um, it's not necessary, but people, it's just dumbfounded people. And I would just always have to repeat myself. And you know, I'm like, that's why like real estate is one of those things, or just like business in general, right? You talk to so many people, but very few people take action.
Right.
So I just got tired of repeating myself, and I was like, you know what? I recorded in a free format on iTunes. You can go and download it there. Like the first 12 are all kind of foundational. Like if you can't do that, dude, like I don't know, I can't help you, man. But
Right.
you know, I'm like, if people are willing to put in the effort and listen to the first 12 podcasts, yeah, sure. I'm totally willing to have a, you know, short call with you and kind of point you in the right direction. You know, but you know, people are like very few people take any action, little initiative.
Yeah, I was talking to a girl earlier and I'm like, how many, I get this question for like our online courses on like GSD and like getting shit done and like going paperless and becoming more profitable. And people are like, so how many people actually, like percentage wise, you know, like if 100 people a month go through the program, who actually does it? And it's funny because you're so right. People are like, why would you teach people to do what you do and like become competitors? I'm like, no, that you've got it all wrong. Like that's not what we do. Like, and most people, you know, they're like, oh, that's so much work. I'm like, well, you got to put the work in to reap the benefits, and not everyone's going to do it. But the few that do it, they become awesome ambassadors and leaders and talking about how their success, like we help them get there, which is awesome. But when I first started doing online courses years ago, and we would have touch points with people like the 30, the 60, the 90-day check-ins. And I would actually take it really personal. I'm like, why aren't you doing the work? Like I've laid everything out for you. Like it's not hard. Like you paid for this. And then my business manager, he's like, you have their money. Why do you give a shit? And I'm like, because I care. Like, I want people to be successful. And he's like, well, if that's why you want to sell online courses, you might as well quit now if you're going to take it personal, because not everyone is going to act that way and implement and actually do it. Otherwise, everybody would sell online courses and, make millions of dollars online. So, you've got to put a little bit of work in. And then like for you, you make it sound so easy, like, oh, I just hire some management, companies. And like, have you had all good experiences with management companies, or have you had like a few stories where you're like, shit, I'll never use them again? Like they're kind of a nightmare story. Or has it been kind of easy sailing for you with your management companies?
Yeah, I mean, definitely kiss a few frogs along the way. I mean, I've got, you know, countless articles of like 25 questions to ask on an interview. But surrounding yourself with the right people, as you mentioned, and it's a lot of it's by referrals. So I mean, we have kind of an inner group of folks, and they get access to the Rolodex. That's kind of like the gold standard right there that people can opt into. But all the information is out there on the website for free, right? I mean, if people want to do the work, it's out there for them. I mean, just I think I have the same attitude as you, right? Like this passive real estate investing has absolutely changed my life. Like I had to work as an engineer for 10 years, but yeah, I quit like a year and a half ago because this stuff actually worked for me. And I realized that for most people who make over 100 grand a year at their day job or kicking butt at their business, you can get financially free in anywhere from 5 to 10 years if you actually invest in non-Wall Street garbage investments. And you start to get on this track of, well, not barely paying taxes too is another thing with real estate. And I mean, it's just taking the cash flow and buying more and more assets. I mean, to answer your question, well, how did it balloon to 3,500?
Yeah.
I mean, the first 5 years was like watching grass grow. I mean, I just had to save up 30, 50 grand a year to go buy the next rental property. But around 2014, 15, I had 11 rentals, right? And that was where things kind of really took off. That's where it hit the hockey stick. But prior to that, it was like watching grass grow.
So patience. You got to be patient is what I'm hearing.
Right. And it's just numbers too, right? I mean, it's this exponential growth of bacteria in a way, but it's your money.
Right. Have you, so on all of your properties, have you always been profitable? Like, the numbers?
For the most part, I mean, I don't really take too much chances, right? Like we're not doing the HGTV thing, flipping houses, or like people like they do heavy rehab on it, and they call this BRRRR strategy where they buy, rent, rehab, refinance. I mean, that's a lot of work,
Yeah.
right? Like myself as an ex-engineer, and a lot of my clients, like our highest and best use is not screwing around with this real estate stuff. Make no mistake, we're passive investors. This is secondary to our highest and best use.
Yeah. So for people who don't understand like how to build a portfolio, and can you talk a little bit more about like what that means? And like I would say probably, I don't know, 10 or so years ago, before I started to really understand like profitability, and my banker was like, portfolio. I'm like, oh, here's all the pretty pictures of all the weddings I've done. He's like, no, that's not what I mean, honey. Like, what is a portfolio? Like, how do you build your portfolio with little time? Like, dumb it down. So if people who don't know what that is and they're young and they're just starting, like, what does that mean? How do you build it?
Yeah, so catch me on this because it's always become second nature. But yeah, I mean, take my blueprint. Like I bought a rental property, rented it out. It got me a few $100 of cash flow after all expenses, capital expenditures. Shit happens. Like there was a few bucks or a few $100 of cash flow every month. So now if I was saving maybe 30 grand, I was saving maybe 35 grand at the end of the year. And just save, go to work every day, and then you buy that next property, and then now your total cash flow goes up, and rinse, wash, repeat several times, and this is how you kind of build up that portfolio of income producing assets to help you buy more and more properties. A lot of my students, they get to a point where they're cash flowing maybe $50 or $100,000 a year, and they can almost double the amount of assets that they're putting in their portfolio. It's a very different paradigm shift from the traditional wealth building dogma, which is, you save up $2 million of X amount of ABC stocks, and then you live off the remains. You start to eat the pile. Like the difference here is, we're buying assets that produce income today, like mini pensions today. We're not waiting till we're old and gray to be able to eat from it. This feeds us today, and the excess helps us buy even more. So it's a huge paradigm shift that Wall Street has created a lot of marketing around putting your money blindly into Wall Street assets. And like I think for me, like being an engineer and a numbers guy, like what really hit home to me was like when I calculated the returns that I was getting from just something as simple as a single family home rental. You're making cash flow, like I said, a few $100 off each property every month, but that doesn't include the hidden benefits of the taxes. You're able to depreciate the value of the property every year and possibly take a negative off your active income.
Mm-hmm.
The property is appreciating at leverage, and you're paying down your mortgage. Well, your tenant is, right? You're not really doing it. Your tenant's paying down your mortgage for you.
Right.
So when you add all those four things up, I mean, I have this on my pretty detailed on my website. And I got a video at simplepassivecashflow.com/returns to break down the
Mm-hmm.
math. But you're making like 30% plus a year. And I looked at my stock portfolio at the time. It was the majority of my portfolio, and I'm like, how the heck am I only getting 8% there, where I can make 30 something plus percent on this side pretty passively? And that's where I started to realize that, yeah, you're getting screwed. Like Wall Street's taken like a good 30% of your profits, whether you make money or not.
Right.
And this system is engineered to keep us all working for like
Yep.
40, 50 years.
Which is so crazy. It's like people think we live in a free country, and I'm like, but they're brainwashing you. They're brainwashing you. So
Yeah.
you have this. I want to get to this book, The One Thing That Changed Everything. And so, what do you say? I mean, people need to go get the book, but one thing that changed everything. What was your one thing?
Yeah, so this was probably about around when I got up to 11 rentals, and I was not quite hitting the hockey stick, but intellectually I was. I realized that I was going to be financially free very soon. I was not going to work at my day job in my 40s. Um, I've obviously kind of quit my day job before that, but I was like, all right, what am I going to do? Right? Like if money was no object to you and you had enough cash flow generating from your assets every single month to
Mm-hmm.
the excess of 5 or 10 grand that you could kind of spend freely, what would you do? And of course, what does anybody do? Like, I'm gonna go on a vacation, right? I'm gonna just do nothing.
Yeah.
And I went around walking around for a few months thinking like that, and then that idea got really old and stale, and it kind of was like, man, that's kind of lame, right? Like,
Yep.
because you see all these guys who don't have money, playing the Instagram lifestyle like that, taking pictures of
Right.
their food, and yeah, I left my job, and I don't know, like to me it's kind of lame, right? It's kind of
Yeah.
a waste. You work so hard to get out of the rat race, and now that you did it, you didn't do anything to capitalize on it.
Right.
And then I just realized, like we were saying, like people are just led into all these bad financial decisions, like buying your home to live in or investing in all these retirement funds, these Roth IRAs. Like it's just bad advice. And it's just, advice put out by large companies like the Fidelities, the Vanguards, all these brokerages to have you invest in their garbage investments. And
Mm-hmm.
I just saw like a big evil in the world. And I just kind of wanted to, go out and, help other people who had open mind about investing in more alternative assets.
Yeah, this is awesome. Like, and I'm looking at some like your online your digital assets. So like you've got your YouTube channel, your podcast, and multiple places I constantly see like this is Lane's passion project, like simplepassivecashflow.com. How did you decide like because exactly what you just said. Oh, I'm independently, like I don't need to work because I've created this passive income. And then you just think you're going to travel the world. And then as entrepreneurs, we realize like, huh, shit, I'm bored. Like we need to be doing something to make a difference, to make life matter. At least that's what I've seen in working with some. I mean, we've had some amazing clients that money is not an object. They care about the experience. They care about customer service. They care about not getting screwed. They don't want people taking advantage of them. They want to be surrounded by true, authentic people that are going to, a lot of ours is like in the event world. And so they can pay for any experience they want. That's not what it's about, but they still are passionate about doing something. And so clearly you are passionate about helping people understand, like, hey, a lot of this is garbage, and let me show you the way that I did it because it's proven to work. So how did you decide, how did you come up with, like, okay, I'm going to call this simple passive cash flow and make a passion project and a company? Like, is it really simple, or does your way make it simple for people to understand how to make passive income?
Yeah, I mean, it's not, the tagline is that it's simple, but it's not easy, right? Like, I'm
Gotcha.
not
Okay.
saying that, this is not for everybody. Financial independence is not for everybody, but it is
Right.
for those who are willing to put in the effort to learn it and kind of deviate off the standard path and to keep at something for more than 6 months, for sure. Which a lot of people aren't able to do. And you know what? That's cool. I like my Starbucks. I need somebody to keep making my Starbucks for me when I
Mm-hmm.
do go.
Yep.
When I do not use the K cup to save money.
Right.
um, yeah, but there's a lot of people out there that kind of live my lifestyle of, like, we were told a lie. We were all told to be good little boys and girls and study hard. And when everybody else was, not going to college or at college playing around frisbee in the quad, we were studying our butts off to get good paying jobs. And then somewhere
Mm-hmm.
along the line, we either did the math, that there was some life-changing experience that made us realize that life was more about this, and we need to kind of get free from this rat race. And buying rental properties, buying alternative assets, going into syndication deals is a way of achieving that. And yeah, I mean, as I started to join different masterminds of more accredited investors, guys 10, 20, 30 years older than me and much higher net worth, I started to realize that there's a certain set of tactics that the wealthy use. And the crazy thing is, it's not that complicated. They're really simple. How do you create your legal entities, do your taxes, and setting up your banking system, infinite banking system. Very simple. But how do you pull it all together, right? I mean, 100 millionaire families, they call them family offices.
Mm-hmm.
They have people who do this stuff for a profession, managing their money. Think of
Mm-hmm.
Alfred to Batman, Bruce Wayne.
Yep.
But what do people who are $1 million to $10 million do? They don't have anything.
Right.
Right. I mean, and that's the void that I kind of fill. I'm kind of that lower level family office consultant for a lot of these families.
Gotcha. So if someone wanted to be in your mastermind, do you have pre-qualifications? Like, what do you look for? And do you take new people each year, or how does that work if someone wanted to learn from you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like I said, just do the free stuff, right? I mean,
You're like,
again,
just
I'm
don't,
a just do the free stuff,
I
right?
don't
And
want your
then
money right
build
now.
a relationship with me. And we do like a annual Hawaii retreat, and get to know my tribe. It's kind of an interesting group of people, very high net worth, but nobody's staying in the Hilton, nobody's staying in the big 5-star hotels. They're all staying in the little boutique, value driven hotels. So it's kind of an
Mm-hmm.
interesting group of people.
Okay. Okay. So you have so many great things like listed on your site. And then if you guys could see this we call it, like, here's our podcast one sheet, like, when you're talking with people, and yours isn't a one sheet, it's like a 10 sheet. It's like, look at all this stuff, which is awesome. Like, it's very it's amazing. And it's also like for people who are doing like what their parent, my parents said, they go to school, work in healthcare. Like my dad, when I was like, I'm not going to go back to my job, like I'm going to fly off to this island in Antigua and like do this job. And he's like, are you on drugs? Did someone drug you? Did you hit your head? Like, what is wrong with you? You have insurance, you have bonuses, you have a 401k or 3B or like whatever the hell it was called at the time. And I'm like, I'm not working for healthcare, like, can I just pay my own healthcare? Like
Yeah.
if I'm making money, I'm like super confused over here. And like, I love my parents. They were great parents. My dad worked for when you said railroad, I was like, ooh, which railroad? My dad worked for CSX for 32 years. So, which railroad were you an engineer for?
The BN one, the
Okay.
orange one.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. I mean, it was like he was there when like there was LNN, and then it changed like multiple times, but I never knew how much people ran like illegal drugs like back and forth on a train. I guess you knew that if you worked in the railroad industry. But he specifically worked in the drug division, and it was super shady shit. And but I learned a lot as a kid. I learned to stay away from those drugs because it can like totally just ruin your life. But I didn't want to I didn't want to work for the same company for 30 something years, and then you retire. And then what do? You have all this money saved up to travel the world, but oh shit, then you get cancer, you get sick, and then you die. And then your money goes to your kids. And it's like, I don't want your fucking money. Like, I'm making my own money. Like, I want you to enjoy your money. But it's like, it just opened your eyes to see like what you don't want to do. But they didn't know any different. They didn't know any better. Like, no one came in. Like back then, podcasts didn't exist, YouTube didn't exist, coaches, like all this stuff did not exist. So the people that take advantage of like all these free resources, I'm just like, soak it up, people. Like, quit watching the reality TV shit and like learn if you want a better life. Like, it's there. The information is there. It's right in front of you. So this was awesome. Where do you have a favorite platform where people can connect with you?
Yeah, I mean, they can go to my website, Simple Passive Cashflow, and then podcast, Simple Passive Cashflow is the podcast from iTunes, Google Play. And yeah, like I said, people are willing to put in the work and listen to the first dozen podcasts and at least see if we're kind of jiving on there. Yeah, totally willing to get on a call and or shoot me an email, lane@simplepassivecashflow.com.
Love it. One last question. How has COVID and the pandemic, has it impacted your business strategies at all, or everything is just the same?
I give two shits about COVID. I mean, like
I love
we
it.
invest in like income producing workforce housing. People need a place to stay. We don't invest in like the high end stuff, with all like the oil and gas executive yuppies that when things go bad, they all lose their jobs and
Right.
have to go, and we don't invest on the low end too, like war zone properties. We're just right in the middle of the bill curve of America, those $40,000 to $80,000 a year households.
Gotcha.
And it doesn't matter. Like, collect some of our properties, the collections actually went way up. Yeah.
Gotcha.
I mean, like, just to kind of get into the numbers a little bit, normally properties collect about 97% of their rents due. You're always going to have some deadbeats. April, May came around and, maybe that dipped a few percent points, but, we're still making money if we collect more than 60%. That's our break even point on a lot of these assets. Like,
That's awesome.
doesn't matter, right? I mean, this is why I don't invest in student housing or military housing or all these, like, especially Airbnb short-term rentals. This is why I invest in workforce house bread and butter investments.
Because no matter what is going on in the world, like you said, everyone needs that.
Right. Well, we
Like,
know pandemic, you can check that box. Who knows what's next, right? But you never know, right? You never know. That's why multiple streams of income, what you do is important. But yeah, workforce housing checks the box on pandemic.
yes, don't put all your eggs in one basket, though. I agree with that 100%. I'm very thankful that if I only had all my eggs in event planning and designing, I would be screwed. But when people are like, what are you doing? I'm like, what do you mean? What am I doing? Like, there's like 10 other things that we do online that generates revenue and sponsorship. I mean, there's just all kinds of things that can be done, but you got to put the time in to learn those things. And like you said, it's not hard. It's just taking the time and surrounding yourself with the right people.
Yeah. Yeah. But I get it. Like people, they kind of want to diversify and kind of spread themselves thin. I mean, you got to put in the effort and focus at least 6 months to a few years to get something set up. And then I think you go build a different stream of income too.
Right. Do one thing well, right? First, and then go do it again. Like you said, like the whole wash, rinse, repeat thing. It's like, we're constantly preaching that with content, and people are like, how do you do one video and then you have all this content, or how do you have all this content? I'm like, well, if I do one video a week, then that video turns into audio for a podcast. It turns into a blog post, a Facebook post, and Instagram. It's like you can use it on all your platforms, but some people don't think that way. The conversation's a little bit different everywhere. You just change it up a little bit, but you can still use that idea and those videos up to, wash, rinse, repeat. So it's just understanding the mindset of it, and then going out there and doing it again. So
exactly.
This was awesome. I could talk your ear off about all this all day long, but we're out of time. So thank you so much for being here. Everybody, be sure that if you're interested in this stuff and you want to become financially independently wealthy and free, really the thing is free, about quality of life, having enough to live, and then building wealth and building assets, be sure to go over and check out Lane's stuff. We'll put the website and all the ways that you guys can connect with him in the show notes. And thank you so much for listening. Everyone, thank you so much for your time, and be sure to tune in next week for another episode of Business Unveiled. Everybody have a great day. Bye. Now that you have all the tools you need to conquer the world in GSD, just share this with your friends and your fellow GSD leaders, and be sure you're a subscriber so you never miss the juicy details of Business Unveiled. And you can ask Siri to listen to the latest episode, but you got to be a subscriber. Before I go, I have a huge favor to ask, and it would mean the world to me. While you're listening, snap a quick screenshot, post it to your Instagram story, tag me at GSDleader_, and share with me your top takeaway from this episode and how it relates to you. Until next time, remember, stay productive and profitable.
You've been listening to Business Unveiled with Angela Profit. Join us next time as we share our experiences to help you be more productive and profitable in your creative business. For more great resources, visit angelaprofit.com.